Hi everybody, welcome back to Water Nerds. My name is Kezia and today I'm here with Analies and we're going to talk some about PFAS, some more, because we know you want to hear more about it. Listen, by now, you've heard a lot about PFAS, or you've heard PFOA, or you've heard PFOS, or if you're in North Carolina, you've heard Gen X, the Cape Fear River. Depending on where you are, you've heard something about it in the news. And, no pun intended, the news has spread like wildfire. Is that appropriate for me to say? I say that because PFAS is usually found in firefighting foam and non-stick cookware, like stuff that we rely on. Scotchgard, it's using it to, like, if you have grandparents or older parents, you know what Scotchgard is. It's, you watch the water roll down the couch cushion because it's been sprayed down with Scotchgard. Well, unfortunately, it's resisting the water, right? It's kind of the problem that we have today with how it's contaminating our water, and it doesn't break down easily. But I'm not using all the correct scientific words, so that's why I have Analies here, and she's going to tell you about, like, I guess the big question is, like, what's the big deal with PFAS? Like, what's the big deal?
So, yeah, you have it exactly right. It's pretty much everywhere in firefighting foam, Scotchgard, any sort of non-stick, non-resistant fabric, anything like that. And some defining characteristics are that it's both mobile and persistent in the environment. So mobile means that it's able to travel really long distances without breaking down. And it's also persistent, which means that it's found in a lot of places in the environment.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we, fortunately, there was an article written by Gerald Silverman, Bloomberg, and they broke down all 50 states and the actions that these states either have or have not taken in regards to this kind of new-ish, I'm not going to say new, because PFAS has been around for a really long time. It's been a known contaminant for a really long time. It's just, I think, more and more states are discovering it in their water supply now. So now it's becoming more of, we don't really want to say crisis, but it's a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big deal. So Bloomberg has this article that broke down what your state has done, what your state has not done, any actions, any plans, any health goals or limits that they've set, because the U.S. EPA has set a maximum contaminant level or a health goal.
Health advisory.
So what's the difference between a MCL, which is a maximum contaminant level, and a health advisory?
Yeah, so MCLs are enforceable levels.
Okay.
So that means that, the state and municipalities have to comply with those, or, there will be some sort of repercussion.
Right.
Health advisories or lifetime health advisories or maximum contaminant level goals are non-enforceable. So that's kind of some regulatory jargon that is thrown around and people don't quite know
So
what
they
that
probably
means.
group it all together
Yeah,
and think it's the same
and think
thing.
think that everything is enforceable, when in reality it's MCLs and action levels are the only
MCLs
two.
and action. So MCL is maximum contaminant level, like it should not surpass this level or you're out of compliance.
Exactly, yep.
Right. But health goals is like, we advise that it should not surpass this health goal, but if it does,
Right.
it does.
Yeah.
There's no repercussions or anything like that. That's interesting. So kind of going down the list. Now, EPA has set a standard of no more. Their health goal, which not enforceable, is 70 parts per trillion.
Yeah.
So, like, what is is that like a can of Coke in a swimming pool? Like, what is that?
Yeah, so that's, 1 part per trillion is one, drop of water in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Is pretty much the standard that we use.
So yeah. 70 is 70 of those drops.
Yeah. Yep.
But the 70 drops contaminate the pool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
So they don't just like, it's not like putting 70 ice cubes in a pool and it's no longer, and it makes the water cold. It's like they actually.
Right. And like I said, its mobility means that it can travel long distances without breaking down. Yeah.
Wow. So let's take a look at this article. Was able to kind of break down what states have done and what states have not done. So we can talk a bit about the states that have been more proactive about taking steps to set their own limits with PFAS. So I think leading the pack right now is Vermont, who has set their state level at 20 parts per billion, which is, I think, significantly lower than
That's
the
what
70 parts.
the CDC recommended over the summer.
So, wait, so that means EPA and CDC are not kind of seeing eye to eye with.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And I think a lot of people were waiting on the CDC document to kind of make the EPA take a federal action, and clearly it hasn't done anything. And there was a Senate hearing recently, and EPA came out and said, we still think it should be 70.
Interesting.
Interesting.
So, and I think that's another thing that maybe people don't know. I know the states know it, but another thing that people don't know is that states can set their own advisory limits.
They can set their own MCLs.
Oh, they can set their own enforceable limits.
Yeah.
Wow. Interesting.
Yep. So that was one component of the Safe Drinking Water Act, was giving states the jurisdiction to create more stringent regulations on regulated contaminants, on the 90 regulated contaminants.
Right.
And then also it gave them the ability to create their own standards for the unregulated contaminants.
Interesting.
And all of the enforcement that goes along with their own MCLs.
Wow. So Vermont set theirs just for PFAS, because it's not just PFAS. It's, you have PFAS, and you have PFOA, and then you have PFOS. And
well, PFAS is like the big umbrella. And then, so a lot of states are typically setting MCLs or health advisories for PFOA and PFOS, but exactly, there are so many other types of PFAS out there.
So, okay, I'm gonna nerd out a little bit. So, all of these fall under PFAS.
Yeah.
And PFAS is per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. And so all of these fall under it, but do PFOA and PFOS do the same thing?
In terms of like health?
Yeah.
So that's also where there's kind of a gray area, and there's not a lot of human studies, because that's, science typically doesn't test on humans, but there is animal studies, and then we can extrapolate that data. But there's just not a lot. Like, it still is a very much so emerging contaminant, and it's in the early stages of being regulated. So there's just a lot that we don't know in terms of the different health impacts that those two PFAS contaminants have on humans.
So do you think EPA is waiting to find out more details, like as far as like the actual, like what it can do, like I feel like there's some speculation, and there are some hard things that they've, that have been said, like it definitely affects the kidneys and liver and different things like that. But like, you think they're waiting for just a wider range of people to be affected, maybe to gather more data, or? I
think that could be it. And then also just the regulatory process is so slow. It was created to be slow. So that's definitely part of it.
Yeah, I guess if you're making decisions for an entire country, then you want to make sure you know enough. I get that. So Vermont, like I said, set their state limit at 20 parts per trillion.
Yeah.
Washington State banned PFAS in firefighting foam and in food packaging. Like, it's against the law.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is a huge step. It is the only state so far to have like completely banned it. Colorado, they have officially listed PFOA or PFAS as hazardous waste.
Yeah.
So they didn't ban it, but it is considered hazardous waste. So I imagine it would be handled the same way as, you know, if someone says there's PFAS in this water supply or whatever, guy's gonna show up in a hazmat suit is what I would assume. However, Colorado's MCL, or at least their advisory goal, is still the 70 parts per billion that the EPA set. So per trillion, sorry, that the EPA set.
A lot of that has to do with political will, differs state to state. Political agenda. Vermont is a liberal state, and they prioritize the environment over others.
And they have for like a while. Like that's kind of been their thing, right? And
then also just the financial side of it. In order to detect PFAS in a municipal water supply, you need really, really advanced technology that's not cheap.
No, I believe it.
And you also need really advanced filtration technology. So those two purchases in themselves is a lot for a municipality to handle. So typically what we've been seeing is smaller municipalities can purchase both of those for like, you know, under $1 million, which is doable to some extent. So smaller municipalities are starting to do that, but like we haven't seen big cities take those steps because it's just financially not feasible.
Right. And I think that's kind of where a lot of states start to kind of call foul because they can't there's a mosquito somewhere that once hey, this is what happens when you do it live. Wow. I don't know if I'm gonna edit that out or not, but it's really okay. All right. But I think that's where a lot of states call foul because, like, take a state like Michigan. Michigan just approved like Ann Arbor, Michigan, just approved $850,000 to help get PFAS out of their water system. Whereas, who's to say that Flint can afford to do the same thing if PFAS was found in their water system?
Right.
So that's an interesting thing. That's a really I get that. You know, if you don't have the money, especially, you know, you don't have it, and especially if there are other more pressing issues. Like I can't even imagine a state like North Carolina. There's on one part of North Carolina in the Wilmington, Fayetteville, Cape Fear area, they're dealing with this big Gen X, which is PFAS. It's just a name for PFAS. They're dealing with this big issue there. Whereas in another part of the state, in Charlotte, they're dealing with this the whole school system dealing with this humongous lead problem in their water. Yeah. And so whatever allocation there is given to like something like water quality or water safety would have to include those two really big things. Right. And those are two of the more heavily populated parts of North Carolina. So
how do you prioritize that funding?
Exactly. Very true. Very true. California, who typically leads the pack on environmental, it's a huge state. They're very progressive, typically leads the pack on stuff. They have set two levels for PFOA. They've set their level at 14 parts per trillion. And then for PFOS, 13 parts per trillion. So I think I can appreciate they didn't just kind of dive into the gray area. They set it for, for each one. And apparently they're sending out drinking water notifications to different parts of the state to let people know what's going on with their water. Colorado listed as hazardous waste. Minnesota basically split EPA's health goal in half. So they said 35 parts per trillion.
Minnesota is also an interesting case because of the 3M lawsuit.
Man,
Major
that 3M.
lawsuit.
What was the dollar amount for that?
$850 million.
Jesus.
Yeah.
$850 million. But that money doesn't go back into water quality in the state, it goes into natural resources, right?
So it was, the wording on the allocation of the money was like natural resource protection, kind of acknowledging that they were responsible, but not acknowledging it head on. So, yeah, I'm not really sure.
So they didn't, so it's the money, that is a lot of money.
Yeah.
The money did not pay for like filtration systems for whatever, water treatment plants.
And I'm not even sure if they've started,
giving the money,
the dispersion of the money to the municipalities yet. Or if 3M has even cut the check yet, but
that's a big check to cut.
Yeah.
Even if they're cutting it, they're doing it with tears in their eyes. That's a big check to cut.
Yeah.
So I made up a chart here with some states that have not done anything, unfortunately. And
another thing, just to go back to that.
Sure.
Even if states say that they don't have PFAS, they might just not know it, is the thing.
Right.
Because of the detection technology, obviously.
And if a state can't afford to detect it, then they can say, oh, we don't have it.
They don't have it, yeah. Exactly.
Which may be another, and I know what you said, that federal mandates are designed to take a long time. But that may also be another reason why EPA has set it so high.
Right, that's exactly right.
Because some states just literally can't even afford to test it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of states are still dealing with lead, let alone, and that's kind of an ongoing thing, but let alone this new PFAS. What is this? I can't imagine the people that work at the water treatment plant or in water quality in that state are like, what is this?
Yeah.
Something else, So unfortunately, there were a lot of states that aren't doing anything. And it's no shade on them, but the people have to know. So states like Delaware, unfortunately, Maryland, New York, Pennsylvania, like the Eastern Seaboard, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, North Dakota, Ohio, South Dakota, Arkansas, Georgia, Kentucky, Mississippi, Oklahoma, nothing.
Yeah.
South Carolina.
And they could also, they don't have to do anything.
They don't have to do anything.
Yeah, so the states that have decided to are, props to them for taking those steps.
But the other states, like who else? Montana. Yeah. Now, I think something that I did find very interesting. So North Carolina, I guess in light of Gen X and everything that happened with Cape Fear, they set this is their advisory level. This isn't their MCL, but they set their advisory level at double what EPA has there set. So there's the 140 parts per trillion.
And that might just be the capacity of the detection technology. Like that could just be,
So detection technology has different capacities?
Yeah, there's different methods and so it really depends on what the state can afford and what the removal rates of the filtration technology are also.
Right. Boy. Now, what I will say about a lot of these states, a lot of them are basically waiting to hear from EPA, which could be another
10 years.
Who knows? To see, what they feel like it should be. Some states, like Tennessee, developed a work group to identify potential contamination. So it's like they're doing something. Texas has cleanup standards where they have this, what do they call it? The Texas Risk Reduction Program. And they have cleanup standards for 16 of those 90 perfluorinated chemicals. They have cleanup standards where you have to clean it up according to the standards that they have set to keep it, I guess, as much as they can out of the water supply. So it's not like they haven't, we're not going to set this 70 parts per trillion. We're not going to we're kind of doing things, but all of this is going to go toward the risk reduction program. So some states like California is also doing biomonitoring studies for PFAS. Utah is about to begin collecting water samples. So it doesn't mean that them collecting water samples doesn't mean they're about to fix the problem if they find PFAS. It's basically an acknowledgement of, if we find it, then we know that we found it.
Yeah.
Without saying we're going to fix it. Wyoming is working to identify high-risk areas. Another thing about Minnesota, and this sounds kind of like what happened with 3M. There's a very passive law that would ask parties responsible for the contamination.
Yeah.
Can you please fix this? Thank you.
Yeah.
There's no.
So it's PRPs, partially responsible parties. So that's something that's going to be in the news more if PFAS is deemed a hazardous substance under the Toxic Substance Control Act. So, attorneys are going to be going to look for people who are responsible for this.
Right. And then ask them, can you pay for this to be fixed because you made it dirty?
Yeah.
And it can either be yay or nay, I guess, from there.
Well, no, they would legally be required to mitigate. Yeah. But a lot of times, because this contaminant has been around for so long, since the 1950s, it's going to be really hard to find every single partially responsible party.
Partially responsible party, right. Rhode Island took an interesting action plan. Everywhere that there's contamination, they send them bottled water.
Okay.
Which I'm like, oh, all right, that's a thing that can be done. So, what can citizens do? What, kind of knowing this information, and I'll call out the states again that don't have any action plans or anything in place. What can citizens of those states do? Yeah.
So I think one, be proactive and don't wait for the federal government. So if you live near any sort of military installment that uses high levels of firefighting foam, you should definitely be proactive, buy a filter. You can also talk to, state lawmakers and really let them know of this problem and say, hey, we need to do something as a state.
Right.
Look at these other states that are being proactive. We can't wait for the federal government. We know it's going to take forever. Let's figure out a plan. So definitely.
So call your state officials.
Yeah, call your state officials. Let them know that it is a concern.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So those states, again, as we get ready to wrap up, those states again, Delaware, Maryland, New York, Pennsylvania, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, North Dakota, Ohio, South Dakota, Arkansas, Georgia, Kentucky, Mississippi, Oklahoma, South Carolina, and I think Wyoming, Montana. That's it. Those are the states. If you heard your state name called, reach out to your elected officials if you are concerned about the possibility of PFAS in your water, or, in the waters, whatever water. Is it mostly, that's a last question. Is it typically surface water that's impacted, like rivers and lakes, or is it groundwater, like aquifers and wells?
So it's both.
Both.
Definitely both.
Okay.
Groundwater concentrations tend to be a bit higher because, it acts as a holding tank, and there's not as much room for it to disperse. So, but it's absolutely both. And I was at a conference a couple weeks ago, and there was a hydrologist, and she said that they followed this plume of PFAS contamination that went from surface water to groundwater, back to surface water. 6 miles, I think.
Wow.
Didn't degrade at all. So that just really, both mobile and persistent.
Wow.
Those are the two key characteristics.
Mobile and persistent. Wow. Kind of like a toddler that wants the fruit snacks, mobile and persistent. Wow. Okay. Wow. So they were able to track it for 6 miles.
Yeah.
And it went from surface to ground, back to
surface.
surface. That's a little creepy.
Yeah.
Okay. So, here's your state name. Please reach out to your elected officials and see what can't be done. There's likely somebody in your state. There's a lot of water rights, like water keeper coalitions that are very active in making sure, as much as possible, that your water is as clean as possible. And we'll talk about that next time. Clean and safe and healthy. What does that mean when it comes to the drinking water supply? Thank you so much for watching. Have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. hello@hydroviv.com, or you can visit hydroviv.com and click on the live chat feature, and you will talk to an actual person. Robots are very expensive to hire, and we have not hired any. So it's all people, and you'll always talk to a live person, and we're glad to answer any questions that you have. Thank you, Annalise, so much. And thanks for watching and listening.